kill my parents.
Pardon me?
Don't do it.
What? Who? Were they shot?
Erik Menendez.
Were they shot?
Yes.
On August 20th, 1989, film studio executive Jose Menendez and his wife Kitty were viciously shot to death in their Beverly Hills home. Nearly 7 years later, in 1996, after 3 court trials and many thousands of hours of TV coverage, their sons Lyle and Erik were found guilty of their murders. But why did they really kill their parents? This is the inside story of the Menendez family murders.
The bodies of Jose and Kitty Menendez were found at their home late Sunday night.
Were they shot?
Erik Menendez.
Were they shot?
Yes.
Minutes after this call, several police officers arrived at 722 Elm Drive, Beverly Hills.
Hello, this is police department.
Yes.
Okay, I want you to come outside. Okay, just come out the front door.
I never killed my brother.
They were ordering the occupants out of the house, which was Lyle and Erik, and they came running out of the house extremely despondent and carrying and crying and yelling and that kind of stuff. And Erik ran from the doorway across the driveway to this tree and started trying to bash his head against the tree, and he had to be physically restrained by the officer.
When they went inside the house, the officers found a grisly scene.
It's August 21st, 1989. We're at 722 North Elm Drive. Reported double homicide. Present at the scene are Detectives Zoller, myself, and Lenahan.
Jose and Kitty Menendez were standing in the den of their Beverly Hills mansion when Jose was shot 6 times, including a fatal shot in the back of the head with a Mossberg 12-gauge shotgun. His wife, Kitty, was shot 10 times in total. When the police arrived, Lyle, 21, and Erik, 18, told them that the killings had occurred while they were at a movie theater watching Batman. The police did not seek gunshot residue tests from the brothers, which would have indicated whether they had recently discharged a firearm. They didn't have an initial suspicion that the distraught duo could be the ones responsible.
Police in Beverly Hills, California are investigating the shooting deaths of an entertainment company executive and his wife.
How many shots do you think went off?
About 6 in a row.
All morning, detectives and technicians from the crime lab continued to look for clues behind the huge oak doors and the ornate windows.
In the hours and days following the brutal murders of Jose and Kitty Menendez, a sense of fear and uncertainty gripped the quiet, affluent neighborhood. The once serene streets were now overshadowed by the gruesome crime that had unfolded in the grand mansion on Elm Drive.
I thought it was somewhere else, you know?
Why? What you think that?
Well, I didn't think it would be here, right where I come to work at.
After what happened here last night, some of the neighbors are worried and afraid.
Their usual sense of security shattered by the shocking violence that had erupted in their midst. As news spread, the community was left reeling, unsure of what to make of this savage attack. Was this a planned hit? An act of calculated vengeance? Even the police, seasoned in handling high-profile cases, were initially at a loss.
It was or was not a hit, or it was a robbery, or it was something else. We're not sure, and we're not speculating at this time.
Struggling to piece together the puzzle of this horrific event, the brutality of the crime raised countless questions, leaving everyone on edge and searching for answers. As investigators worked tirelessly to unravel the mystery, the shocking reality of what had occurred began to sink in, forever altering the lives of those connected to the Menendez family. Jose Enrique Menendez was born in Havana, Cuba, on May 6, 1944. At the age of 16, shortly after the conclusion of the Cuban Revolution, he relocated to the United States. Jose pursued his education at Southern Illinois University, where he met Mary Louise "Kitty" Anderson. The couple married in 1963 and moved to New York City, where Jose completed an accounting degree at Queens College. Their first son, Joseph Lyle, who later chose to be known by his middle name, was born in 1968. After Lyle's birth, Kitty left her teaching job, and the family relocated to New Jersey. It was there that Erik was born in 1970. The family settled in Hopewell Township, where both brothers attended Princeton Day School. In 1986, Jose's career as a corporate executive took the family to Beverly Hills, California, as he had joined the company then known as International Video Entertainment. The boys lived a pampered lifestyle and grew up with every financial advantage. They were put through elite tennis coaching, and both were extremely skilled at the sport, helped along by their father's obsessive intervention. Erik wound up as a nationally ranked tennis player in his age bracket, whilst Lyle was destined to follow in footsteps of his father's business career. Jose was known as a hard-driving father who would work his sons to the bone in athletics and everything else. Jose was worth around $14 million at the time of his death. And in the months following the killings, Lyle and Erik Menendez began spending lavishly on luxury items, businesses, and travel.
Lyle returned to the Princeton area and began a kind of spending frenzy. His friends say they thought it was his way of dealing with his grief. Over several weeks, he bought clothes, a Rolex, a $62,000 Porsche. Rather than return to school, he bought a restaurant, saying his mother would have been pleased.
Erik hired a full-time tennis coach and competed in several tournaments in Israel.
And for a while, Lyle hired these bodyguards, saying he feared for his own life because his father had a lot of business enemies.
The brothers eventually left their Beverly Hills mansion, vacant, and chose to live in neighboring condominiums in nearby Marina del Rey. They also dined at high-end restaurants and took trips abroad to the Caribbean and London. Together, they spent around $700,000 before they were made suspects by the police. Although the brothers' conduct following the crime might have appeared odd, it didn't constitute concrete evidence. However, after the murders, Erik Menendez's former psychologist, Dr. Jerome Oziel, reached out to his former patient and began counseling the younger Menendez brother once more, with older brother Lyle joining the sessions too. Nearly 6 months later, in March 1990, authorities received an unexpected tip from Judalon Smith, the extramarital lover of Dr. Oziel.
I would not want children that looked like Dr. Oziel.
Who became a whistleblower on what she perceived as his controlling behavior.
Dr. Oziel made tremendous effort to convince me that my mother was trying to kill me and poison me. He isolated me from every single person I knew.
All right, let's wait for the next question.
She informed the police that during therapy, the brothers had admitted to the murders, and there was an audio tape capturing their confession.
If I didn't please him and if he didn't love me, then I was going to end up dead.
And why did you think you were going to end up dead?
Because he told me.
And did he say how you were going to end up dead?
Yes, he said that he would call Lyle and Erik and tell them that I had been outside the door and that I knew and that I was wanting to go to the police and that they would kill me.
Days after breaking up with Dr. Oziel, Miss Smith went to the police. Then, on March 8, 1990, Lyle Menendez was arrested by Beverly Hills police outside the mansion where his parents were killed. 2 days after that, Erik Menendez surrendered at Los Angeles International Airport upon returning from Israel, where he had been playing tennis. 4 months later, on July 20th, 1993, the highly publicized trial of Lyle and Erik Menendez began. Although they were tried together, they had separate juries deciding their fate, and if found guilty, they faced the possibility of the death penalty, as the trial was one of the first to be broadcast on the new Court TV channel. It garnered national attention every day, helping to fuel a nationwide obsession with a case that had all the elements of a great primetime soap opera. A rich family torn apart by scandal, 2 handsome and mysterious young men, a grisly crime, and psychodrama galore. Steve Brill, the founder of Court TV, told Rolling Stone in 2017. The Menendez trials probably had the effect, maybe good, maybe bad, of demonstrating that even if you didn't have a celebrity, if the circumstances were dramatic enough, people will be captivated. When Dr. Jerome Oziel took to the stand, he told the jury about the first time Erik Menendez casually confessed to him.
He sat on a bench, and for a significant period of time, Erik told me things about his father and how his father was a great man and how he intended to write a book about his father. And we headed back to the office, and right before we entered the front door of the office building in which I had my office, he leaned back against, as I recall, a parking meter that was in front of the office door and said, we did it. And I don't know if he said we killed our parents, but I asked him, you mean you killed your parents? He said yes. And from that point, we went back up into the office.
Although the confession tape, later recorded in Dr. Oziel's office, was a damning piece of evidence, it didn't secure an instant verdict, but did demonstrate the Menendez brothers' key defense, that they wanted to kill their father because he abused them, both sexually and psychologically. In the tape, the boys are incriminated when they discuss their reasons for killing their mother, going into shocking detail about their parents' relationship, and they revealed that they found their mother's suicide note in the lead-up to the shooting, which seemed to have a big effect on their decision.
It was a big thing holding us back from killing my father, is that we thought that we would just kill Dad and eliminate the problem. And see, the first step, which is when I found out the first suicide note, and then it got worse and worse, but I found the suicide note and I started crying. I could not read it from below the phone and started crying. She had made a decision that she couldn't take it anymore and that Dad didn't love her anymore. And that's the affair? I believe it was after she found out about one of the affairs, like the main affair, that it had been 8 years long or whatever, or that maybe after she found out there had been more than one. I walked in the room when she was crying, or when I did, frequently. She would stop crying, I want to talk about it, it's my own problem. The alcohol, the drugs, she would bring up to me, it was a sign that it was getting worse. And she would finally come to me and go, you don't understand how much stress I'm under. I take 13 pills a day, I drink. That's where we sort of feel like, you mentioned before, that we were doing her and us a favor in putting her out of her misery, really. Didn't want to get to a point where my mother killed herself and my father, we were left to deal with my father. We had to come, like I was saying before, we had to make a decision. It was one of the harder ones, and it was a separate issue. Okay, these are the reasons my father should be killed. There's no question. What he's doing is impossible to live with for myself and for myself based on what he's doing to my mother.
Did Erik Menendez describe for you, in particular, what it was that he was upset with his father about?
Yes, he did.
What did he say?
Well, basically that the father had just been completely dominating and controlling, was impossible to please, had perfectionistic standards, that he was controlling of a lot of different aspects of Erik and Lyle's life in a very extreme way, and also that he had been very controlling and very damaging to their mother, and that she also was miserable. So basically, they conceptualized the father. Erik told me that they saw the father as someone who was pretty much not possible to live with. That he was just an emotionally dominating, tyrannical person.
But Dr. Oziel here is merely scratching the surface to what the Menendez brothers claimed in their testimony. When Erik Menendez took to the stand, he detailed the nature and effect that years of sexual abuse by his father had on him.
What do you believe was the originating cause of you and your brother shooting your parents?
Me telling.
You telling Lyle what? Was it you telling Lyle about something that was happening?
My dad. My dad. If you don't ask, my dad had been molesting me.
And did you want something from your brother? Is that why you told him?
I wanted to stop him.
Were you seeking help from your brother?
Yes.
I told him that it was basically oral sex that was happening.
Okay. And did you tell him anything about any kind of violence that would accompany it or any kind of threats from your father?
Yes.
And what did you tell him about violence?
I told him that there were pins and tacks that Dad would stick in me and use.
Pins.
Could you speak up, please?
That Dad would stick in me and use.
Pins and tacks?
Yes.
And did you give him the impression that these pins and tacks were being used during oral sex?
Yes.
And in fact, was that something that did happen between yourself and your father when you were a teen?
Yes.
And what, if anything, did you tell him about any weapons that your father ever threatened you with?
I told him that he threatened me with a knife.
Now, Mr. Menendez, do you remember the kind of knife that your father threatened you with?
Yes.
What kind was it?
It was a jagged knife.
A what?
A jagged knife on one end. It was a Rambo knife.
A Rambo knife?
Yeah, a knife that he had.
When older brother Lyle took to the stand, he testified about his own experience of paternal abuse between the ages of 6 and 8, as improper photographs of the brothers were shown to the court, providing key evidence for the defense.
This is a proof sheet of the sequence of the photographs from Eric's 6th birthday party. These photographs were found in this envelope. This envelope has the handwriting of his mother, Mary Louise Menendez. This is the one of Lyle's nakedness, which was saved by his mother.
He would take photographs of us, our private parts.
And would he have you come in and pose for these photographs, or how would that happen?
I would just, if we were in the showers or bathtub or changing, he would just use the same camera that my mother used, and then he would come in and take just a photograph or two, and he wouldn't say anything, and then he would leave.
The prosecution's theory is that the boys, the children, took the naked pictures.
Lyle then testified about the nature of the abuse itself.
After sports practices, he would massage me, and we would have these talks, and he would show me, and he would fondle me, and he would ask me to do the same with him, and I would touch him, and we would undress.
Where would this take place?
In my bedroom, like 2 or 3 times a week. We would be in the bathroom, and he would put me on my knees, and he would guide me, all my movements. He used objects.
What kind of objects?
A toothbrush and some sort of shaving utensil brush.
And what would he do with the toothbrush?
Well, in the bedroom, we'd have what we called object sessions. He'd have a tube of Vaseline, and he just played with me.
Did you tell your mom?
Yes.
What did you say to your mom?
I told her to tell Dad to leave me alone. And he keeps touching me. She told me to stop it, and that I was exaggerating, and that my dad has to punish me when I do things wrong. And she told me that he loved me.
Did you tell your brother? Did you do something to your brother?
Yes.
What did you do to your brother?
I took him out to the woods whenever I felt, I don't know, I took him out sometimes, and I took a toothbrush also, and I played with Eric in the same way. And I'm sorry.
When you were about 13, did you think that it might be happening to someone else?
Yes.
And who did you think it was happening to?
Erik.
And did you do something about it?
Yes.
What did you do?
I talked to my dad.
What did you say to your dad?
I told him that I knew what was going on with him and Erik, and I heard the noises, and that I wanted him to leave Erik alone.
Years later in 1980, Erik Menendez finally told Lyle about the abuse. And when Lyle confronted their dad about it, the brothers told the court how they began fearing for their lives, that they believed their parents were going to kill them in an attempt to prevent the truth from getting out.
You just learned that your brother had basically threatened to tell on your father.
Yes.
If the two of you disappeared that night, did you have in mind anything that your father might think about that?
Well, I thought Dad was going to kill us, and no matter where we went, anywhere, he was going to kill us. Obviously, my dad thought that Lyle and I were going to go tell somebody.
So if you left the house that night, what do you think your dad would have thought?
That we were going to tell.
That you had gone to tell?
I don't know if we had gone to tell that instant, but that we were definitely going to tell.
So where did the conversation with your brother Lyle lead to Thursday night?
It led to us having to buy guns. Led to Lyle saying, we got to protect ourselves. We got to do something. Because I kept eliminating all of his options.
Okay, he was coming up with options.
Yeah, I was pretty much just crying and doing whatever I was doing. He was saying, well, what if we could do this? Well, what if we do that? And he said, calm down, we'll work it out. And I was just not being very helpful.
Did you think any of the options would work?
No.
So a decision was made to try to protect yourselves yourself. Is
Yes.
that it? And you were talking about the fact that Dad would kill you, is that right?
Yes.
Did you think your mother would stop him?
Oh, I thought my mom would do it with him. There wasn't no one and the other.
Why did you think your mother would do it with him?
Because that's who my mom was. They were very much of a team. Besides the fact that my mom hated us, they were a team.
Were you so sure that your mother hated you before Thursday night as you were after?
After, I definitely knew. For her to have known all those years, I knew she must have hated me, but I thought it before as well.
In terms of other witnesses, Alan Anderson, the cousin of Lyle and Erik Menendez, testified about his experiences with the Menendez family, describing the household dynamics and odd things that happened during his visits.
Mr. Anderson, during the period of time that you were at these houses, you never saw any sexual abuse, did you?
We were not allowed in the room.
You saw no sexual abuse, is that correct?
If you don't want to consider the showers that they took together after they were playing tennis, I found kind of strange.
And was there a time when in cleaning the room you found something unusual?
I found a Tupperware container under the bed.
And what was in the Tupperware container?
Feces remnants. No, I'm not an expert on feces, but no, it was not animal feces, no.
Another cousin, Diane Vandermolen, gave similar testimony about the unusual goings-on inside the Menendez family home.
Lyle came down, and he was asking if he could, I thought he was there to say goodnight, and he started asking me if he could sleep down there because Kathy had already gone and there was 2 single beds.
Okay.
He proceeded to indicate to me by touching himself down and saying that his dad and him had been touching each other down there.
Criminal psychiatrist Dr. Ann Burgess, whose work in criminal profiling inspired the character of Wendy Carr in Mindhunter, explained that the murders did not seem like they were planned out of greed, but more of a reaction to the constant abuse and fear they were living under.
Because there are just too many factors that point to disorganization.
And the main factors then are the noise of the weapon and the wounds.
The choice of the weapon, the location, and the noise level, injuries and location of wounds, yes.
One of the other factors that you consider in evaluating a crime scene is where the injuries are located on the victims, correct?
That is correct.
And we spoke about that this morning, but I wanted to ask you, isn't it true that in certain kinds of cases there will be injuries to the sexual organs of the victims?
That's correct.
And that indicates what generally?
It may indicate a sexual motive for the killing.
In the prosecution's case, they called a computer expert to the stand who testified that software had been used to delete all the files on Jose Menendez's computer, including the Menendez will. Another computer expert, hired by Lyle Menendez, confirmed he was asked to check the hard drive for 4 keywords, including the word will, to see if the data had been deleted or not.
So I searched the complete hard disk everywhere and found that those files, the words, existed no place else on the hard disk except as those 3 file names containing essentially meaningless information. And I told Lyle this, that unfortunately I had failed and was unable to recover any useful or meaningful data for him.
What did he reply to you after you told him that?
What he told me is that was very good, because in fact he didn't want to recover the information. He wanted to make sure that the information was not in fact there and couldn't be recovered even by someone who was actively trying to recover the information.
Then came a shock betrayal, as Lyle Menendez's best friend, Donovan Goodrow, appeared to lie in his testimony and explained that Lyle did not tell him about the abuse, despite a tape recording proving he did.
We've obtained tapes that suggest Lyle's buddy had the inside story. But in testimony today, he somehow forgot all of what he knew.
Crime 9 News brought you the exclusive story last night, and within a matter of hours, the report became part of the trial. Our story last night brought the Menendez Brothers murder trial to a temporary halt.
That's right. The jury was sent from the courtroom today so the judge and attorneys could talk about an audio tape we obtained and aired last night right here. The tape was an author's interview with Lyle Menendez's best friend. Now, in that 1992 interview, Donovan Goodrow said Lyle had told him there was sexual abuse in the Menendez family. That appears to contradict Goodrow's courtroom testimony yesterday. Today, he watched the Crime 9 News report played in court.
Told me about his father. And
basically, he said that his father had been abusing Erik.
Yeah, him and Erik. And
Lyle also.
Yeah, and would take baths with him and stuff like that. I just, oh man, you're at this.
So you still have no memory of that conversation with Mr. Rand?
No, I don't.
Are you saying that that conversation never took place?
No, it obviously took place. I just don't remember the conversation.
Do you recognize your voice?
Yes, I do.
That is your voice?
Yes, it is.
The apparent contradiction is crucial because the Menendez brothers are claiming self-defense in the murder of their millionaire parents based on allegations of abuse.
On January 13th, 1994, after 16 days of deliberation, Erik's jury announced that it was deadlocked and unable to reach agreement on any of the counts. On January 25th, after deliberating for 24 days, Lyle's jury announced that it was deadlocked. The juries for both brothers were polarized over whether the brothers were killers or long-suffering victims of abuse. Judge Weisberg declared mistrials in both cases.
Tonight, with the Erik Menendez jury deadlocked, a mistrial has been declared in his case.
In Los Angeles today, a mistrial for Lyle Menendez.
The trial had divided the country, with the question on everyone's lips. Was the Menendez abuse a defense for murder? The second trial began in August 1995 and was somewhat less publicized as Judge Stanley Weisberg did not allow cameras in the courtroom. During the second trial, Weisberg, relying upon a legal decision by the Supreme Court in an unrelated case, limited testimony about the sexual abuse claims and did not allow the jury to vote on manslaughter charges instead of murder charges. Leslie Abramson continued to represent Erik, although she was paid by the taxpayers of Los Angeles County because the Menendez estate had run out of money. But the prosecution team acting on behalf of the state was refreshed, with heavily experienced assistant DAs brought in to convince the jury. David Kahn spent 2.5 years mapping out the strategy he would use to dismantle the Menendez defense. The prosecution referred to the brothers' defense as the abuse excuse and successfully objected to the admission of a large amount of defense evidence. And this time, Lyle Menendez declined to take the stand.
This time, a Los Angeles jury went beyond the tearful testimony of brothers Lyle and Erik Menendez and found them guilty of the shotgun murders of their mother and father.
On March 20th, 1996, after 4 days of deliberation, the jury convicted the Menendez brothers of first-degree murder, as well as conspiracy to commit murder. 3 weeks later, on April 12th, the jury began to deliberate whether the Menendez brothers should be sentenced to life in prison or death. After deliberating for 3 days, the jury decided that the appropriate punishment would be life in prison. But the story doesn't end there. 3 decades later, Cliff Gardner, one of the brothers' appellate attorneys, told 48 Hours that new evidence had come to light, proving that the Menendez brothers were telling the truth about being abused. The evidence in question? A letter, alleged to have been written by Erik Menendez to his cousin Andy Cano in December 1988, about 8 months prior to the killings.
At times I wish I could talk to her about things, you know? Someday. Especially Dad and I, but the way she worships him and tells him everything, I'm so afraid she'll tell him whatever I say. I just can't risk it. Lyle got in a huge fight with her over why we couldn't spend Christmas with the rest of the family. And Mom freaked out and said if he wanted to go, he could go alone. I just don't know why she wants to hurt him like that. Lyle wanted to stay, but Dad wouldn't let him. So now I'm stuck here alone. I've been trying to avoid Dad. It's still happening, Andy, but it's worse for me now. I can't explain it. He's so overweight that I can't stand to see him. I never know when it's going to happen, and it's driving me crazy. Every night I stay up, thinking he might come in. I need to put it out of my mind. I know what you said before, but I'm afraid you just don't know Dad like I do. He's crazy. He's warned me 100 times about telling anyone, especially Lyle. Am I a serious wimpus? I don't know, I'll make it through this. I can handle it, Andy. I need to stop thinking about it.
The recipient of the letter, Andy Cano, testified in both trials, but prosecutors called him a liar and continued to argue that the abuse never happened. The crime was manslaughter, not murder. That has been the defense position from day one. Not that they should walk, but their punishment should be commensurate with what they did. These were kids who were sexually abused their whole lives.
This shows that Andy wasn't making it up. It's contemporaneous evidence from Erik to his cousin Andy about what was happening.
And this becomes so relevant now as in California law. Voluntary manslaughter can result in a sentence of 3 to 11 years in state prison. So an approximate sentence for the deaths of both parents would come to around 25 years, at the very most. As of 2024, Lyle and Erik Menendez have served 34 years in prison, meaning a retrial on manslaughter charges would likely see the brothers released if it were to be successful. And the letter isn't the only piece of evidence that has surfaced. Roy Rossello, a former member of the Puerto Rican boy band Menudo, has come forward claiming that he was also sexually abused by Jose Menendez back in the early 80s, when Rossello was a minor and a member of the band. At the time, Jose Menendez was working as an executive at RCA Records, and RCA signed Menudo to a recording contract. Rossello is now 54 years old. He says in a sworn affidavit filed in 2023 that he went to Jose Menendez's home in the fall of 1983 or 1984. Rossello would have been between 14 and 15 years old at the time. He says he drank a glass of wine, then felt like he had no control over his body. He says Jose Menendez took him to a room and raped him. Rossello also states in the affidavit that he was sexually abused by Jose Menendez on 2 other occasions, right before and right after a performance at Radio City Music Hall in New York. The Menendez brothers' attorney, Cliff Gardner, filed a habeas petition in May 2023 citing the letter and Rossello's affidavit as new evidence that proves his client's convictions should be vacated. Ultimately, it will be up to a judge to decide whether the convictions should be vacated. If they are, then it would be up to the DA's office as to whether they would retry the Menendez case, potentially allowing the defense of sexual abuse and the ability for a jury to return a manslaughter verdict rather than murder. For more than 20 years, Lyle and Erik were imprisoned separately, with Lyle in Mule Creek State Prison in Ione, California, and Erik, about 500 miles away at Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility in San Diego County. For years, the brothers communicated in letters. But, in February 2018, Lyle was transferred to another housing unit at Richard J. Donovan. And in April, Erik moved into the same unit as Lyle. They cried and embraced when they saw each other for the first time. In 1999, Erik married his longtime pen pal, Tammy Ruth Saccoman, with whom he shares his stepdaughter, Talia. Tammy wrote a book about their relationship and experiences. He also took up painting and even gifted a portrait to comedian Kathy Griffin, and, with other inmates, made attempts at prison reform. Lyle served as president of inmate government at Mule State Creek Prison and has worked in a support group for other prisoners who endured sexual abuse. From 1996 to 2001, he was married to Anna Erickson. However, the former model divorced him when she found out he had been writing to other women. 2 years later, he married Rebecca Sneed, a former magazine editor turned defense attorney from Sacramento. But despite prison reform, multiple marriages, and frequent media adaptations, the Menendez fight for freedom has never gained as much traction as it has in the last few years. A group of young TikTok users are leading an effort to free the Menendez brothers, believing they were wrongly convicted of murdering their parents. These supporters, some as young as 12, argue that the brothers acted out of fear, and they're advocating for clemency by even writing to Californian law officials. But, despite serving 34 years of their life sentences, it feels like the Lyle and Erik Menendez story isn't over. What do you think? Leave a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe to Crime Collated.